And Kabiyesi is here to say to you that the greatest shame in the present administration, why it is difficult for the people of the Southwest to accept the government, is not just because it is a totally inept government, which nobody can be proud of, or that it is corrupt and corrupting. It is that it is an insult to the generosity of the spirit of Yoruba people. We do not have the greed. A good knowledge of the country is very important to a leader, because you cannot solve a problem, the etiology of which you don't know. And many of the acts of apparent wickedness and carelessness that we see in our leaders, a lot of it arises from pure ignorance, because you assume an office and you don't know what it means. It's like carrying a young man into the cockpit of an aircraft. He's seen so many buttons, he doesn't know what they represent. That is how President Tinubu is feeling now, and many have felt before him. They just get there and they see so many buttons and lights, and they keep pressing anyhow they like, or they give up and just lie down and say, somebody handle it for me. But you need to have a good knowledge of the country. So, welcoming us this morning to the Middle Belt Forum, and it's our first consultation in the attempt towards the 2027 elections. You are our first port of call. And I must thank you for receiving us 4 years ago, 2022, when we came to meet with you. At that time, our great leader was still with us, Air Commodore Dan Suleiman. Yes, sir. And shortly after, he passed away, and we all had to go to Guyuk for his interment. The Middle Belt Forum is the place to come if you want to discuss solutions to Nigeria's problems. Because we are Nigeria today because of the Middle Belt. Otherwise, we will be two different countries. It's the middle of the North and the South. And the health of Nigeria can be measured by the ambience in the Middle Belt. When we have great leaders developing the country, uniting the people, and working towards the implementation of the National Development Plan, you will see that many of us will come to the Middle Belt, because then Ajaokuta will be running. Many other projects will be running. We will see in Kaduna our motor plant to be running. And you will see that most of Nigerians would naturally drift towards the Middle Belt. It's actually because of the people of the Middle Belt. That is why today we have a non-controversial federal capital called Abuja. You know the fight. Kabiyesi was part of them. When the federal capital was in Yoruba land, as accommodating as Yoruba people are, they didn't like the idea that in the heart of Yoruba land somehow there will be a sovereign called president who can be driving anyhow and everybody has to stop for him. I remember when Kabiyesi was with Jakande in Lagos, they used to be concerned about the fact that whenever President Shagari needed to come out, Jakande convoy had to wait. So everybody was saying they should move this capital somewhere. But it's only in the Middle Belt that they will welcome everybody with an open hand. And apart from the fact that I am genealogically from the Middle Belt, because our ruling house came from Oyo, and Oyo at that time is where we have Niger State now. So if you look at the history of many of the southern populations, they all arose from the Middle Belt. Because the Nok civilization and all the adjacent civilizations around that produce all the great people we find in Nigeria today is from the Middle Belt. So the idea that Nigeria is British creation is not correct. It is just British facilitation, because the center where we are today has always been the cooking pot. And as a descendant of Shango myself, you will see that at least 1/4 of my blood is Nupe. So for that reason, the Middle Belt is where every Nigerian can go and you will feel at home. On the other hand, when there is problem, it will show in the middle, because you cannot have an unhealthy body with a healthy stomach, because the Middle Belt is the stomach of Nigeria. Whatever we ingest, that is where it is being processed. So when we have thoughtless leaders, a paramount example of the incumbents that we have now, and some bad leadership of recent times, the temperature will be high in the Middle Belt. You will have insecurity, you have poverty, you have kidnapping, you have restlessness, and you have a greater emphasis on identity politics. You will have people feeling insecure in their homelands, thinking that the government of the day is coming to displace them from where they are, because we all know that just like Congo is to Africa, so is the Middle Belt to Nigeria. The riches and wealth of Nigeria are on the soil and under the soil of the Middle Belt. The oil that we are talking about and all the hydrocarbon wealth of Nigeria is less than 1% of the wealth we have in the Middle Belt of Nigeria. And the Middle Belt of Nigeria is where we have our water. That's why Niger means the Benue. And it's the pivotal agro-industrial center for Nigeria. So what it means, therefore, is that we must be able to ensure three things. That nobody becomes the leader of Nigeria if he doesn't understand the Middle Belt very well. Because if you don't understand the Middle Belt, you cannot understand Nigeria. Because that is the intersection of all our historical interaction. And this is where we signed the deal. So don't be surprised that even though the colonial government came, the British came by sea, but when Lugard came, he said, no, I will settle in Lokoja. There must be a reason. The British may not like them, but they have a good sense of where the action is. So that is why they settled in Lokoja, and Lokoja became officially the first capital of Nigeria. So what I want us to understand is that a good knowledge of the country is very important to a leader, because you cannot solve a problem, the etiology of which you don't know. And many of the acts of apparent wickedness and carelessness that we see in our leaders, a lot of it arises from pure ignorance, because you assume an office and you don't know what it means. It's like carrying a young man into the cockpit of an aircraft. He's seen so many buttons, he doesn't know what they represent. That is how President Tinubu is feeling now, and many have felt before him. They just get there and they see so many buttons and lights, and they keep pressing anyhow they like, or they give up and just lie down and say, somebody handle it for me. But you need to have a good knowledge of the country. Second, every Nigerian has to be in the mind of a Middle Belter. Why I say so is that in the Middle Belt, that's where you cannot isolate yourself. If you travel from Ilorin and you go all the way to the coast, you are meeting the same people. If you travel from Asaba and you go all the way to Owerri, you are meeting the same people. But in the Middle Belt, almost every local government you go, you meet different people. So you learn how to enjoy diversity, celebrate it. And in the tapestry of this diversity, you will now understand that we are the same people, expressing ourselves creatively in different ways. So if you want to solve the problem of Nigeria, you need to know how is it that the people of the Middle Belt, with all the diversities that we have been able to come together. And that is the role that the Middle Belt Forum has played in Nigeria. That is to say, the people of the Middle Belt, who are about 280 different ethnic groups, have been able to form an identity and come together. And you recall how the voice came up in history when the United Middle Belt Congress, led by Joseph Taka, entered the National Assembly. Nigerians at that moment ceased to be Yoruba, Fulani, and Igbo. We now realize that we're actually a much more diverse people. And that is the kind of government you need to run. Second thing you need to do is that you need to involve everybody. You need to have a government that involves everybody. And Kabiyesi is here to say to you that the greatest shame in the present administration, why it is difficult for the people of the Southwest to accept the government, is not just because it is a totally inept government, which nobody can be proud of, or that it is corrupt and corrupting. It is that it is an insult to the generosity of the spirit of Yoruba people. We do not have the greed to go to one state and choose 3 ministers for one state. Where in my state, for example, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Interior are from the same local government. Nobody who is a responsible leader will govern like that. Where a large swath of the country is not represented in the government. And Nigeria is full of talent everywhere. So it is totally unacceptable that Ogun State will have 3 ministers, Ondo State will have 3 ministers, and these are key ministers. And under them, they profilate themselves with different appointments of their cousins and different people. This is not something we can ever be proud of. And it's not something that we want to be associated with. And that is the reason why the issue of social justice is put in our Constitution. Our Constitution is written in a delicate way because we are not a people who are of the same identity. We are only of the same destiny. We are not the same identity. We are different travelers going to different places, but traveling in the same boat. So we are all united about not sinking the boat, but each one has its own destination. And when you finish, you come back to the same boat and sail back to harbor. Therefore, a government that will not recognize the diversity and respect it is not a government that we should tolerate. The last thing is to understand that you cannot serve God unless you can make friends in the Middle Belt. If you say your religion is the only one and is the best and the dominant one, you cannot be in the Middle Belt because Muslims will be there, Christians will be there, and traditional believers will also be there. So a time will never come in this country where any group can turn themselves to internal colonial masters over the other. That is the essence of the system of government that we have written to our Constitution. And that is why we have Chapter 2 of the Constitution and we have Chapter 4 of the Constitution. And that is the spirit of the Middle Belt Forum, that diversity is an asset and justice is to be experienced within that diversity. So this is the essence of the Social Democratic Party. So what we want to do is to work with the Middle Belt Forum to understand solutions to the problems that we have and to use the Middle Belt as a staging post to fixing all the other problems we face in Nigeria, and I will summarize them into 5 broad categories. The first problem we have in Nigeria is the acceptability of one another. You cannot have a family that keeps arguing over fundamentals for the entire generations after generation. We must come to a final conclusion about the kind of country we want to have, how we want to manage our local resources, how we want to manage our diversities, how we want to manage interaction and succession planning, how we want to manage identity and what identity stands for, how we want to manage all the other things so that we can now have a united home and then we can now project Nigeria's power regionally and globally. So that question has not been answered. We are skating around it. And we have a clear solution to it. And the clear solution we have to it is in 3 parts. We will have a government that rules by the book. Because if you have a government that rules by the book, we all have the book, the Constitution. If you follow that, you would not have a government where the rest or some part of Nigeria can feel that this government is it might be just almost as close to having a colonial government at home. Second, we would have a government in which anybody, even if you are not inside the government, will feel like this is my government. Three, we will have many parts of our national life that the government cannot touch. So the consequences of politics will be limited. That to a certain extent, it doesn't matter if my party loses. I have this limit where the government cannot intervene. Secondly, we have to deal with security. Any government that cannot fix security in a short order has no business calling itself a government. And the Middle Belt has borne the brunt of our insecurity. Even when we had our civil war, if you check the casualty records, I've been reviewing the casualty records now the past 1 month of Nigerian civil war. All the sides that went to fight the war or started the war, each one is writing books about their experiences. But if you check, substantial brunt of the war was borne by Middle Belt soldiers. Young boys in their villages, on the farm, who didn't know what caused the war, being recruited to the army and sent to different parts. And after the war, they got demobilized with not substantial help after that, and they all back to the farm. And you will see even before then, when we had colonial system, many of our Middle Belt people went to Burma. They got to Burma without even knowing how to spell Burma, to go and fight for people. So the Middle Belt needs a country that has security. And if you have all of these, and at home, people cannot go to their farm, women cannot go to the river to fish or to do anything, we need to put an end to that. And the reason why we have not put an end to it is because there is an insecurity procurement complex which the different governments of recent times have set up, where by the time you enter government, from insecurity alone, all of you are going to become billionaires. And that is the reason why we need to deal with that. Secondly, there are hegemonies within Nigeria. And we need to understand that there are internal hegemonies who are still fighting the war of occupation. And we need to end that immediately. Because we could not have gotten independence from Britain only to suffer internal oppression. So we need to deal with that. The third issue we need to deal with is economy. The poverty that we feel in Nigeria is an insult to Nigeria, particularly an insult to the Middle Belt. How can you be in the Benue Basin and people are hungry? When you have a government that is importing rice and taking it to Benue Basin to distribute with the logo of the president on it, what does that tell you? That that's the total government of neglect. It's an act of insanity to be in Nigeria and lack basics with all the resources that we have. So we will deal with the issue of the economy, and there are 3 things you do to deal with the economy. Number one, you have to have a government that is a caretaker, not a government that is looting the economy. Because if you look at the fiscal arrangement in Nigeria alone, the money Nigeria has made in August is enough to pay the way of the government for the whole year, if the government is honest. Somebody once asked Chief Awolowo, in one of those days when he was simplifying the economic quagmire of Nigeria, that all of these education programs, social programs, how are you going to fund it? And he said, go and check how much government spends on tea and entertainment. So just alone, that will take care of education. So, and that spirit is still what is on now. A lot of wastage in government. This government is, recently they kept away $20 billion. And after keeping away $20 billion away from the foreign reserve, they went and secretly signed the Gazelle 2 program, where even when we come in, the crude oil that is going to come in future, they've already collected money on it. So all of this...
Right, in terms of leadership, the whole of Africa and the black world will not be respected by the Committee of Nations because of the strategic place God Almighty placed Nigeria to be as the leading nation in Africa and the pride of the black man world over. I am sure you are aware By projection, in the next 20 years or thereabout, Nigeria is expected to have a population of about 400 to 450 million in the next 20 years, which will place us at the third most populous country on earth after India and China. And today, this is where we are. In terms of all indices of human capital development, we are left behind when we are expected to rescue the whole of Africa and the black world. So I think to us, it's a rare privilege to have a person of Prince Dr. Adewole Adebayo to fly our ticket for this rescue mission, for the greatness to place Nigeria on where it's supposed to be, to provide the leadership for the continent and the black race world over. What I want to assure you is that in the SDP, Prince Adewole Adebayo is one Nigerian that have demonstrated enormous responsibility, courage, commitment of purpose, and patriotism to the party and to the country. This is a Nigerian that when he lost the 2023 general elections, he did not run away to either Dubai, England, or any part of the world and left the party in this area. That was when he remained resolute to commit himself more to the party, for Nigeria, and to humanity. And that is why today the SDP, despite all challenges, remain the most credible, the most viable alternative in 2027 available to Nigerians for the rescue mission of our dear country. I want to assure you, the SDP as a party will not let you down. Prince Dr. Adewole Adebayo and his team will not let you down. And we are not going to take anything for granted for this wonderful reception, support, and commitment to our cause, to the cause of our dear nation. On behalf of the esteemed members of my National Working Committee, other leaders at various levels of the SDP, and the teaming members of the SDP, and other well-meaning Nigerians, I thank you most sincerely for this honor